Yes. All right. Thank you, Madeline, for the prayer. Just a second. I've got somebody that keeps texting me, and I think it might be my husband. No. And it's a big group of 30 people, so I'm going to see if I can get out. Do not disturb. Otherwise, those will all be coming through my class today. Do you know what I heard? I think on my phone I can say I'm driving, right? And it stops all my notifications. Yay. At least on my phone. Okay. Everybody grab your Shakespeare if you've got it. I had to read mine online because I have no sonnets in my Shakespeare book. So grab those. And then let me ask this question. What does it mean? I want to kind of work on what this 15th, 16th, 17th century kind of thing means. What does it mean if we are in the 21st century? Have you ever thought of that?
Doesn't it mean that, like, in the 200s, I guess?
The 2000s?
The 2000s, sorry.
That's okay. We can go back to the medieval time period if you really want to. But yeah, it means that our years that we are living right now is 2000 and above. But it's called the 21st century. Why? How does that work?
Can I answer that?
Yes.
So, if you think about it, if you start at 0 and you start having 100 and 200 and 300, then you could call it the 0th century, but they called it the first century because it was the first century. And then when it got to 1000, then it was the second century. And so now that we're up to 2000, then it's the 21st century.
And when you get to 1000, it's not the second century, but it's the 11th century, exactly. So let's think of it in smaller terms. Think of a younger sibling, and let's say they're in their first year. How old are they? Or how old could they be? They're in their first year. Yeah, they could be 0, Dylan. I've got a granddaughter who's in her first year. Kendall.
So Koreans do this too, where like when like the mom is pregnant, like that is your first year. So when you're born, you're 1. And so, yeah. And so it kind of like reminds me of that, like when you're 0, well, so like 0 to 100 is the first century. Or so it kind of reminds me of that, but that's like their culture. So when you're 14, you're 15 or something like that.
Oh, that's interesting. That sounds even more confusing, but good comment. How old is my granddaughter, Edie? She's in her first year.
Wait, she's 5 years. Isn't she 5? I can't remember now.
Oh, you're talking about Mary. Mary's in her 6th year because she's going to turn 6.
Wait, are you talking
on
about
her birthday? I'm talking about Jane.
Oh, okay. I can't even remember how old. When was she born?
End of June.
So she's about 4 months, right? 4 or 3 months.
She's in her 5th month, so she's going to complete at the end of.
Oh, that's true. Because she was born at the end.
Yeah, this is super confusing, but I wanted you to know this because for the rest of your life, you're going to hear the 15th century, but you know it's not going to be the 1500s. It's just the 15th century. So it's going to go from the 1400 mark all the way up to 1500, right? So if we're in the 16th century.
The 17th. Wait.
If we're in the 16th century, what would all of those
1500s,
yeah. If we're in the 17th century,
600.
try again.
I meant to say 1600s.
Okay, good.
You know.
Yeah. So when we hear the story of Joseph Smith, and he's going out, it's his first vision, and he says he's in his umpteenth year. What year is he in?
Did you say 14th year?
15.
I said he was in his umpteenth year, which it just doesn't, it means you get to fill in the blank. Yeah, he's in his 15th year, Eliana. That's right. So how old would he be if he's in his 15th year? 14. Exactly. I think, let's see, Eliana, you are still in your 15th year, right? And next Wednesday, before we sing happy birthday to you, you will still be in your 15th year. But then in class, after we sing happy birthday to you, you will be in your what year?
16.
Yeah, 16th year. You're not going to be 16 yet, but you're going to be in the 16th year. Do you see how that works? Does everybody give me thumbs up if you got it? Got it. Okay. We were just noticing in some of the answers in Canvas that maybe there was some misunderstanding, and gosh, it's a real hard thing to do if we haven't discussed it and talked about it. Okay. Let's see. There is another couple of things I wanted to bring up too. Where was it? Okay. Let's talk about the difference between the Reformation, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, and the Restoration. I'm going to put this in the chat box. Anybody want to take a guess? Yeah, Edie.
So the Renaissance is kind of like a rebirth of like the Greek and Roman traditions. I mean, they're going back to the art, that style of focusing on the body, and yeah. And then the Enlightenment is more of like a focus on the logic, and we're not going to focus so much on revelation. It's all going to be logic. And what was the next one?
I would say reason. Oops.
Reason.
Mm-hmm.
But what? Let's see here.
So you talked about the two middle ones.
Yeah, and then the Restoration. Isn't that when? Okay, Are you talking about like just the restoration of the gospel, or just the restoration?
Yep.
Yeah.
Restoration of the gospel.
Because there's yeah.
So I have a question.
Sure.
So are we going to read books about the Reformation, like Martin Luther's books and different things, his works, or is that not this?
We talked about him a little bit. We ran out of time last year. So that was during the medieval time period. So the Reformation comes before the Renaissance.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good.
Thanks. What is the Reformation?
It's just kind of like, it was where the religion it was changed. The way they viewed religion was changed. And Martin Luther had he played a big role in that, with the way they viewed marriage and how the monks could get married. And well, that was his belief. And that was like fulfilling like their role in this world, in this life, which they really are.
By the way, a couple weeks ago, did anybody read the church news about the Reformation and Martin Luther? It was really, really good. I've got a copy of it, and I keep thinking I want to take a picture and just post it for everybody, because I know we talked about it last year a little bit. Yes, but let's be more specific, Carter. It was a change in how we viewed religion, but what was that? What was the change? Edie, do you want to add something to that?
Well, I have a thought that kind of goes with all of what we're talking about. So,
Okay.
If Eliana wants to go.
Okay, let's stay with Reformation for right now.
Okay, I was going to say the Reformation is kind of like the Protestant movement a little bit. So it's breaking off from the Catholic Church. So it's kind of branching out into different, I guess, regions of Christianity.
Yes. And why were they breaking off? Let's talk about this purpose. Why were they breaking off?
A lot of the leaders in the Catholic Church were extremely corrupt, and there were a lot of things that they were upset about. Some were upset about like infant baptisms, and other people were upset about like indulgences, and there's just multiple different things that they disagreed about, and that they thought that the clergy wasn't right. So they thought that they weren't representing God necessarily like they were claiming to, and so they decided to create their own churches.
Good. So there was this breaking away. And so, Carter, you're right. They were viewing religion differently, but specifically, they were seeing that it wasn't right. It was corrupt. They weren't representing God. Thank you, Eliana. So Reformation is the start of Protestantism. Yes. Look at that word Protestantism. What is the root of that word, Madeline? She can't hear me, I don't think.
Wouldn't it be protest?
Yes, protest. So they're protesting what's been happening in religion. And they're starting to ask questions, and they're starting to say, well, that's not how to interpret the Bible, and indulgences aren't right. So Madeline, we're answering your question, but I don't know if you were listening. So Edie just said that the root of Protestantism is protest. So yes, they protested. And then the separatists were separating themselves even from Protestantism. Go ahead, Edie. Tell us what you...
Well, I think, from last year, what we studied from last year all the way to what we're going to study at the end of this, I've seen a pattern of battling between extremes. There's, I don't know, it's kind of, we first see the religion, like that's the biggest focus. And it starts as a really good movement, but then religion becomes like the government in a way. And it takes over. And then we've got the Protestants trying to fix that, or not fix it, but like leaving that idea to try to fix it in their own life. And then later on we see the Enlightenment there, where there's these people who are going away from religion, going the opposite, and just focusing, and not the opposite I'd say, but just they're focusing on logic and reason. And then you see the Romantic period where they're going from that to emotion and feelings, but they're eliminating like the gospel. In a way, even during that period where everyone was so focused on the religion, in a way, they were eliminating the true gospel because they were so focused on the part, like the church, if that makes sense. So, I don't know. I feel like there was just a lot of extremes, and they were trying to go away from that, but they went to another extreme.
Okay.
So to balance that.
Okay. Yeah. Eliana.
I was just going to say, as Edie was talking about how like they were protesting by basically just leaving, it made me think of in the lecture yesterday how the lecturer was talking about how in Shakespeare, when there's an external obstacle, usually there's an exodus, and when there's an internal obstacle, there's usually an invasion of like something new. And you can see both of those things in the Reformation, because they were leaving old traditions and they were instituting new ideas at the same time, because there was internal and external obstacles among all the people.
Excellent observation. I want to talk about this word epistemology. Does anybody know what that means? Epistemology?
Is it the study of how religions like connect to each other or break off?
Good try. No, not exactly. No, I don't think it even really has anything to do with.
Does that have to do anything with like the word epistemological?
Mm-hmm.
So understanding like the different perspectives
Yeah.
in a way,
It's actually
because I think epistemological is the act of doing it. So I think it's a little different. So.
okay. Epistemology is pretty much, this is really general. I don't want you to say that this is exactly what it means, but I want to get to a point where we understand. Epistemology is basically the way you get your truth. Some people get their truth from history. They study history, the past, the present, the future is not history, I guess, but they study those things and they learn what they can or cannot do and what the consequences are. Some people get their truth from science. For me, sometimes I'm pulled towards science because I'm always concerned about my nutrition, what I'm eating, and what science is saying about certain things. And sometimes I just focus on science. Another way we can get our truth is through reason. Okay, by reasoning together, we each bring a little bit of the truth until we, come to the truth. Some people receive their truth from revelation. And we could keep going on. I mean, this we could call empiricism. Is that the right word? Empiricism? No. How do you, no, it's E. That's so funny. I was thinking of like empirical. Empiricism, which is the study of, here's my hypotheses. I said this is going to happen. This happens. Now I know. This is the scientific method. The whole point of getting of education is to get to truth through all of this, through all of these epistemologies, not just through science, not just through reason, not just through revelation. By the way, God gave us reason. He wants us to reason, but he wants us to use revelation too, and science and history and other ways. There's many ways to get to truth. So during these movements, there were certain breaking away because people were learning new ways to get their truth. They had only focused on revelation before in the medieval time period, although it's what they thought was revelation, right? So I want to go to this question that this student had, and I hope it's okay with this student that I copied this down. No. This one. So in Canvas, there was this, I want to move it down here so that we've got it all on one page. I loved this, what this student asked, and I'm going to read it. I didn't ask permission of this student, so I'm not going to have this student read it. I should have asked permission, and I'm sorry. But this person said, the Enlightenment begins in the 1700s. Philosophical movement, and this is just their notes. They told me that this was just their notes, so they're not complete sentences, but it gives the general idea. It's a philosophical movement put excessive trust in man's reason over revelation. People question and also doubt revelation. Influenced the world dramatically. At the end of the 1700s, there's a backlash. the French Revolution. And then this person is asking really good questions about the lecturer, Wes Callahan, and I want to discuss it with you. He says again, or she says again, I thought he, Wes Callahan, made some assumptions here. Do you really think that the Enlightenment is the cause of revolutions? Are revolutions a backlash against reason? That would mean reason is starvation, poverty, tyrannical rulers, monarchies, and bloodshed. That's not reason. The common people are not revolting against this grand concept called reason. Does the Enlightenment really mean destruction of everything that went before? Obviously, this is the first time I've made a serious study of the Enlightenment, so I don't have a lot to bounce off of. But it seems oversimplified and biased. Is it really the root of liberalism? I'm not liberal. However, it seemed like he was inserting things he was personally against into the narrative to prove to me that the Enlightenment was a negative thing. I think this was an excellent group of questions, and I think we needed to discuss them. So let's go for it. Madeline, and I'm going to write some comments down here.
I think I felt the same way, almost like I don't really have any understanding of the Enlightenment before this too. So when he started saying, no, it's bad, then I guess I was kind of the same way. I don't think that was a totally third party, I guess, description of it. I think he was definitely biased.
Okay. All right. What are some other thoughts? Oh, I wish I could see all of you. Jace.
Well,
and then Kendall.
Wes Callahan has kind of showed from the beginning of this course that he has a very negative view of the Enlightenment period.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if it's partially like this thing that I struggle with a lot, which is sometimes I want to be different from the crowd. So you kind of sees everybody just saying like, oh, the Middle Ages were so dark, and like it was because people just thought that everything came from God. And he disagrees with them, so he goes and he wants to go into another camp and fight against what they're saying partially. Like I can kind of see that might be happening, or maybe it's because he genuinely believes it. But like what we know in the gospel is that the Enlightenment was leading up towards the Restoration, and there needed to be a questioning of men who just said that they had revelation from God in order for there to be this restoration. Like the Dark Ages, like there was definitely true faith during the apostasy in the Middle Ages, but I feel like a lot of it was trusting in people or like find belief, or preying on the belief of common people for power.
Okay, good. I think Kendall had her hand raised, and then Lucy.
Okay, so what you were saying about the Enlightenment, I think like in the medieval ages, like everything was based off of revelation, like you were saying with Joan of Arc. I mean, she couldn't really prove anything. But with the Enlightenment, I think people, to me, it kind of sounded pretty prideful. If he was right, like we're just gonna believe in what we think. And I took a lot of notes on this, and it really like kind of intrigued me, because I was thinking what he said about the French Revolution too was a backlash. I was thinking about that, and I was like, well, is it really evil, or like was it okay? And so I was thinking about that, but yeah. Sorry.
I have a thought here.
Okay, hold on. I think Lucy was next.
Okay, so I thought the speaker was like a little bit biased, but I also felt like his views weren't totally ungrounded, because like I started thinking about Machiavelli, and I feel like he totally relied wholly upon reason. And I think, I don't know, just following reason, it would lead you to do things that were more Machiavellian, which kind of led to revolutions in some way.
Okay, Edie and then Madeline.
Yeah, so I agree with all of you. I think there was a little opinion there. But also we have to recognize that we see the Enlightenment. We see that those time periods that differently because of the gospel. And he doesn't have the gospel.
How do we see it? Don't use the word differently, but use precise words. We see it how?
Because we see it as an opportunity to allow the gospel to come in. That immense questioning was that allowed Joseph Smith in a way to ask which church to follow. Wes Callahan is not a member of the church, and so I don't think he sees it. I think he did put opinion there, but I don't think he sees it as an opportunity so much as a confusion of what was right and what was.
Okay, so you're saying that because he didn't have this understanding, he just saw that, oh man, everybody's rejecting this great truth, this church, and they rejected it, and look at what happened. Okay, I can see there. Okay, anything else? Madeline.
So I think that part of the Enlightenment was maybe, or part of the Renaissance too, maybe people were trying more experimental things like Francis Bacon and Galileo. And I think that some of them were very conservative, and they still like believed in God and things. But I think some people maybe who saw what they were doing might have said, oh, he's totally right. Okay, we're just going to throw away the rest of it and just do science or just do reason. So I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I honestly have no idea, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. Does anyone else agree? And I loved what Edie said. I agree with her too.
So can I just kind of add to this? This is later on, but like Darwin, it's the same thing. Darwinism, like a lot of people take, his ideas of, in his book, and then reject, like the creation or of God. And yet what they don't realize, they're not taking it in the big picture, is what Kalam says is really important and key. It's because, knowing the story of Darwin, he was a religious man. He believed in God. We don't know clearly how exactly, but I think we judge things based off of one thing. And sometimes we have to see like the bigger picture to understand it completely.
Yes. Okay, Edie, use your raising the hand mechanism, because we've got some people that were ahead of you there. But yes, Eliana's got your hand raised.
Love what everybody's said already. Something that kind of frustrated me was it seemed like he felt like this is a really far drop down from like the Middle Ages. And like, to me, I just see it as like, it's kind of like a process and it's like a cycle and like it needed to happen. But at the same time, like, I feel like he's a little bit idealistic about the Middle Ages in some ways. Like, obviously he's biased. But I know we studied a lot of amazing people and a lot of faithful people with great ideas when we studied the Middle Ages. But it's hard for me to accept that you can judge an entire world and like 1,000 years of history by the greatest thinkers and the most faithful people of the time. Like, you can't do that of today. You can't grab the greatest people and be like, look, President Monson is great. That must mean everyone's this great, or everyone thinks this way, or everyone has their heart in the right place, or whatever. I don't think that you can really do that. And I think that most people were like very, very poor and very like ignorant, honestly, because so many people were illiterate. And I think most people were just worried about survival, and they weren't as like worried about religion and focused on really even the question of religion or reason. Whereas with like the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, it's brought a lot of like art and technology into the picture that gives people inspiration and also like the comfort from technology, I guess, to be able to have like the time or like the security to be able to think about these things, and to not just always be worried about like war and like sickness and what you're gonna eat and stuff like that. So I thought that was my opinion. And then one other thing is he said that it was like a destruction of everything that went before the Enlightenment. And I thought that that was not exactly true, because I think most of the people that felt that way were probably the clergy. And we already know that because of the Reformation, there was a need to kind of distance themselves from the clergy, because a lot of the clergy were very tyrannical and very unvirtuous people. And I think a lot of the clergy didn't do anything more than lip service to God. And so I think that some of his feelings about the Middle Ages are a little bit off. And I don't know if I'm just being pessimistic, but that's the way I've seen it. So it just kind of surprised me that he felt like it was such a giant drop from the Middle Ages to the Enlightenment.
If you were in his position and you did not know what you know about the restored gospel of the church, would that change your perception?
I think it would change my perception, but I think I would still feel like the Middle Ages wasn't as ideal as he's making it out to be. I would still have the opinion that a lot of the world wasn't even Christian, because whenever he talks about the world, he's just talking about Europe. And I would also have the opinion that a lot of them were probably not like really focused on that, or like their heart might have not been in the right place.
Mm-hmm. And I think we're getting to a point that we really need to discuss, that our perceptions and our knowledge changes what we know and what we opine, what our opinions are. And it's okay to listen to someone who's from a different faith, who's talking about history in general, because I think we can ask those questions. We can ask these good questions that were up here. And I think it brings a really good discussion. So first of all, please be this kind of person that asks these questions. And then look at the person who's actually talking or teaching us the history, and take the truths, ferret out the truths from them, and understand that they can be biased. I think that's in a very mature way to deal with everything that we read and everything that we look at, except for maybe the scriptures. I wouldn't, I don't know if I would question the scriptures, but I would certainly ask many questions to understand them. But I would certainly question always the books that we're reading in class. I would certainly question the Wes Callahan and Peter Lightheart is who we're listening to today. Or was that yesterday? That was yesterday. I want everyone to know that it is good to ask these kinds of questions and to question them and to understand, but also understand that they came from a different position and a different understanding. They're trying to promote what the church set up, the Catholic Church set up. they're trying to keep that here and hold on to it. And so, of course, they're going to put the Dark Ages up on a pedestal and put the Enlightenment down. Somebody had their hands up. Who was it? Kendall?
Yeah, I have mine up, but I think other people were before me. I think Edie and Madeline were before me.
Oh,
You were before me.
Okay. So Madeline, were you first? Sorry, I have to stop sharing so I can see everybody's.
Oh, sure, I can go first. Joe, can you mute? Okay. Sorry, we're in the same room. So I was just going to kind of go off what Eliana was saying about, I kind of have two things. Just, well, I guess when you really look at history, then it's so amazing to think, and whatever you learn about Dark Ages and the Enlightenment, it's really neat to learn to put it in an eternal perspective and a restoration perspective, because then you think, wow, Heavenly Father really knew what he was doing, and here he's putting people who are trying to choose the right, I guess you could say, and trying to be closer to him, and even though they're not perfect, they're trying. And because so many people have tried so many different ways, then there's finally able to be a way and a country where Joseph Smith could have the first vision, and where religious freedom was. So.
Yes, it all plays out. And was it Elder Renland in conference, or one of the people in conference talked about consequences? No, is that what he called? Not consequences. He talked about coincidences. Different word, different meaning. He talked about how nothing is a coincidence for God, that there were special key people placed upon the earth, not the ones that would bring the restoration of the gospel, but the ones that would bring the Reformation, the ones that would bring the Enlightenment, the ones that would bring whatever was happening, whatever movement. Those were key people that were children of God, that yes, nothing was a coincidence. Now, I think there are some really negative things that have happened because of those movements, but there was some equally beautiful, perfect things that had to happen for the movement to go forward where we are now. And I think we cannot deny that there were some negative things that went on. Thank you, Edie.
I guess my question, I don't know. My thought has been how, like, in the chat box, we've been talking about, like, the ideal society, how, like, the medieval age really wasn't an ideal period of time, which I agree. I don't think it was, like, the ideal. But my question is, what exactly determines that ideal? And if we're trying to determine an ideal, does that limit to what becomes the ideal? I don't know.
Good question. Anybody want to answer that? Eliana, you've got your hand raised, but maybe you're going to say. Oh, go ahead, Jace.
I'm sorry, I don't think I understood the question. Could you reword it?
Okay, so in the chat box, they've been talking about, like, how, like, the medieval age really wasn't an ideal period, to, like, how West Callahan kind of shows it to be. Like, at least when you were there, Jace, right? When we were watching, and I kind of felt like he brought a lot of great points, but they were just a little more ideal than, I don't know. So anyways, I guess my question is, what makes a society or a time period the ideal, as we call it? And if we are, I guess this is kind of hard to understand this part of the question, but if we're trying to determine which societies are ideal, does that limit, I don't know how to word it, but does that limit to the possibility of what could be ideal? That's very confusing, but.
So maybe do some components limit other components?
Well, no, what I'm trying to say is, like, if we're trying to find an ideal period, does that limit the opportunities of what could be ideal. I'm not wording it in a.
I think what she's trying to say is kind of like if we're picking an ideal out of what we know can exist or what has existed, then are we closing opportunities to what could exist that might be more ideal than what we already know?
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. And
Yes, thank you for helping. I'm not really great at articulating.
Oh, I have problems too.
So do I. Jace.
What I want to say is, I think like what makes an ideal society, it's not like specific policies, I guess, or specific like systems that people have. Like, so like really shouldn't limit possibilities that way, I'd say. But I'd say generally, in order to have a prosperous society, you have to have people with good character who are willing to work hard for, and who have open minds and want to be free. Like, and basically, if you have a system like that, people are going to work hard. So like, even if they don't have any resources, it can become an ideal society because people will work with it, and they'll also work for freedom so that they can have like free trade basically. And every single time that happens, the people that do that are blessed, and they're able to have a prosperous and ideal society. But it doesn't necessarily have to have one system of running it or certain policies or be in a certain place, I guess.
I like that. I also want to add, like, I was kind of thinking more like looking back into society and looking back into history, like, because that's what Wes Callahan is doing. He's like looking back in the past, and to me it seems like he's putting an ideal on certain times. So how do we look in the past and find not necessarily like a balance between the different, I don't know, like the ideals in the past?
Let's go to Eliana, then Kendall for comments on your first question, I think, Edie, and then Madeline too. Eliana?
I think I would say that there's a little bit of a difference between a society and a time period, because a time period can involve multiple societies. But I think all of the things that Jay said can apply to things that would be good for a time period because they're broad enough but still direct enough to produce those results. I also think that, like, within a time period, I think it's really good when a time period makes progress. And I feel like in, like, the plan of salvation, and like Madeline was saying, looking at history with an internal perspective, like, we can appreciate things strictly because they're necessary and because they move us forward. And so I think that a generation would be very not ideal if it moved us backward and it didn't have some sort of purpose, is what I would think. But I think it's interesting to debate about what the ideal time period would look like, because a time period involves multiple countries and societies, and so it's hard to, like, get them to work together. But yeah.
Good. Okay, Kendall.
Okay, so I was thinking, like, what kind of defines the time period for me and their ideals are just the morals that are kind of going around right there. Like, just kind of what everyone believes. So going back to what Edie was saying, her first question, like, there were some, I think in every time era, there were good people and they were bad, like Dante and Joan of Arc for the medieval, but then there were also bad who, like, would counter that. And I think that, like, being favored of one time period is kind of biased, because there are good things and there are bad things about everything. So it's kind of like weird to just be like, okay, I love this one and I'm sticking with this one and everything else is wrong. You know what I mean?
Very good. Yeah, you have to kind of ferret the truth out of all the eras. Good. I think it was Madeline, and then we'll go to Eliana next.
I just think that the sorry.
Oh, wait, I
There's
think
a
Edie
quote,
was
I
after
think it's by
Madeline.
Thomas Jefferson or one of the founding fathers, and it talks about how it doesn't say like a ideal society, but it's talking about how a democracy or a better form of government, I guess, can't exist unless the citizens themselves are virtuous people and they're honest and they're hardworking and other stuff. So I agree with maybe Jay said it, or someone said that they don't think that it's like a set thing. I think it's really more of how the people interact, because if we all know that everyone's trying, and we all kind of try to see each other as Heavenly Father sees each other, then we'll all be super forgiving and super easy to forgive and selfless and grateful to each other. And even if we can't have a perfect society, we can have a rockin' awesome one, I guess. So,
Which depends on our choices, right? Good.
Yeah.
I messed up. Edie first and then Eliana.
So I guess, okay, the purpose of this question that I asked was kind of like showing that there really isn't a period that can cover, like, can be so ideal. Because I think we're in a fallen world and there are good and bad things happening at one time. And sometimes we focus so much on one of those. And that's what we get out of that period or that time. So how can we, I mean, and this is a question that you guys can talk about, or we can talk about, or just like, on your own. But how can we implement that the understanding of both good and evil? How can we study both of those and actually get a better understanding of a period just by studying every aspect, I guess?
Okay. Good question. Eliana, do you have something before we go to that question?
Yeah. I was just going to say, sometimes like in the scriptures, like in the Book of Mormon, it will say something like, the people were wicked, but there was a percentage of the people that were righteous, so God spared them because of their prayers or something like that. And so like, it was just the other day I was like, I wonder if there's like a magic number of like the percentage of people that have to be righteous for God to spare them or something like that. Because like, if you think about time periods and think like, well, if the majority of people are good or righteous or something like that, then it was a good time period. Then like, I don't know if you can even say that if it's a majority thing or if it's like just that there are good people in the world, or like, I don't know.
It's interesting because when we're small, when we're young, everything's black and white. You either do your little jobs and feel good and your mom's happy, or you don't, you do your job, and the opposite is true. And I'm trying to paint a picture here. As we get older, we realize that life is not black and white like that. It's not so concrete, that there are as many different corrupted philosophies as there are people. And even we have our own little corrupted philosophies as well. And so if there are almost 8 billion people in the world, we pretty much have 8 billion perceptions and 8 billion biases and opinions and different understanding. And so I want to go back to, I want you to look at the things that you're going to be learning from Wes Callahan and other people, other good people in this world. And I want you to learn how to set those opinions aside, only in the sense that not to let them hang you up, but to let you understand why they might be thinking that and how you can understand them a little bit more and understand what that society that lost the authority, because you can see that he feels like the Dark Ages pretty much were great, and then they lost, the people and the churches lost that authority as they moved forward, and how there's so much chaos now in the world. We can understand that's how he sees it. And we can begin to understand a little bit more about how our next door neighbor in Wichita Falls or Twin Falls or Buell, trying to remember Kimberly, I'm trying to remember where everybody lives, how they might feel about something. When I grew to be a young woman and a mother, wife and a mother, I knew so much. And as I had children, I've known less and less, because my children helped me to understand people's feelings better, understand other ideas better. Let's let Wes Callahan let us understand what people of the Christian faith might feel, so that we can be better missionaries or communicators or understanders. That's a new word. I think I've just talked too much.
Let me just jump in. I think we are Christians. I just want to correct that. We believe in Christ too, but other Christian religions. I just wanted to correct that for clarification.
Thank you. When we, yes, we are Christians. Sometimes for sake of, yeah, I agree with that. Thank you. I will try to be better with that. I agree totally. Eliana.
Oh, I just didn't put my hand down. But are we going to talk about the second question Edie asked? I forgot what it was.
Yeah. Shoot, I wish we would have written that down. Maybe how, oh, she wanted to know how we get to that perfect society.
Now I can't remember. It was something. Okay, let me look in the chat box. I just need to see.
Okay.
You wrote the first question, right?
I don't think she did.
I don't think I did.
Okay, what are the components of an ideal society? And can one like reach that understanding if they like determine that, like predetermine a society? Looking back, does that make sense? You said it way better than I did.
Eliana did?
Yeah.
Let's hone in on some of the feelings and thoughts of those who have not yet shared. What are the components of an ideal society? What do you think? Go ahead, Carter.
What I've noticed is that when you're serving other people, then that just makes camaraderie better. Like everyone's happy. Service is a key that I've found that makes people happy, and then just trying to follow the gospel teachings. I don't know, just trying to live in harmony with the Spirit, so then you can receive revelation to know how to help others.
Awesome. So that brings you right back to service, feeling the Spirit to know how to help people. Good. What are some other ideals, components of an ideal society? Let's hear from those who we haven't heard from. I like what Jay said, that he talked about the city of Enoch. Our families can be cities of Enoch. With not the goal to be translated up into heaven, but with a goal to be happy. Amidst a world full of turmoil, we can be a city of Enoch for our community. Can't we? If we ever try to force people to live in an ideal society or bring people along when they don't really want to, it's not going to work. But I think it has to start with us. We have spoken for an hour on this. This is awesome. But I want to go to Shakespeare a little bit. I want to talk about Shakespeare, if that's okay. I think this is going to be a discussion that we've just had. It's going to be a discussion for your whole life. And I think you can continue working with it, because I think it's very important. First of all, very important that we ask questions, that we ferret out truths, that we make judgments on things that we're reading, just like this student did, and that we're discussing it here. And I think we'll keep doing it. But I do want to spend some time on Shakespeare. Let me ask Lanny, is there anything that maybe I didn't bring up that you want to add?
No, I thought that was great. I thought I'm good.
Okay, good. All right. Let me share my screen a little bit. I want to talk about Shakespeare. Is this it? Yeah. Okay. But before we go into Shakespeare, there's one other thing that I wanted to share with you about what a student she observed in reading original texts. And I got permission from this student to put this in. This was from last week, Galileo. I want you to notice what kind of learning this student went through. Even though I don't understand most of what Galileo said, because of the parts that I read and reread and studied over and over and finally had a little bit of light shone on them, I feel a satisfaction that I gained just a little bit of knowledge out of his work that was very hard for me to understand. Because of how hard it was for me to understand anything that Galileo said, the parts that I have learned are so powerful and important to me. If presented to me in my math textbook in the simplest form possible so that I understood super easily, the knowledge that I gained would be practically worthless to me. Because I had to study and think really hard to understand the little bit that I did from Galileo, the knowledge that I gained is worth so much to me. Reading the direct works brings so much more satisfaction than a simpler made-for-you-to-understand version. What kind of learning did this student go through? Was it all about understanding Galileo? Jenna?
I feel like, sorry, it's loud. I don't know. I feel like she just, or he, who is it? Yeah. It's just better, I guess, for you to learn that much harder, and it just, like, it makes you want to learn more, and it makes you proud that you learned it, and glad that you, yeah.
Wow, yes. I'm just getting a message from Kendall saying she can't hear any of us. I'm going to tell her to log out and log back in. Hopefully that will help. Yes, Jenna. Any other observations? Oh, Eliana, you've got your hand raised.
I was just going to say, I think it's super important to read the actual text and not like a textbook or somebody else's writings about what it says, because whenever you read somebody else's writings about what it says, they're going to insert some of their own opinions and biases into it. And so this whole discussion we've been having about some of the biases of, I guess, West Callahan, like, you have to filter that out when you are reading somebody else's made easy version. Whereas when you have the actual text, like, you know for sure what it says and you get to choose how you interpret it. And so I think that's really powerful, especially because, like, you never get the first time of reading something back. And so if the first time you read it through somebody else's lens, it's going to be even harder, even if you later go back and read the original, to, like, see it differently, or which might be the way that it's supposed to be seen.
Excellent. I love how you said that you get to choose how you're going to understand it and take it in. That's so true. Good. Elias.
So kind of along the lines of that, when you're reading something simple and it kind of comes in, you just kind of like your education is expanded, but it's not expanded in a way that you remember it. And when you take the time to study it, it shows that you want an education that will last you longer than just a simple one. And you want to expound your education, and that's important when studying these things.
Yes. Excellent. Kendall. Maybe you weren't here when you heard my question, but we're kind of asking, did you hear me read at all the quote? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and then I read it.
Okay.
I just had to disconnect a speaker, I guess. But
Oh, okay.
I felt the same thing where it was like that person, whoever wrote that, had a hard time understanding Galileo, and it was really hard because like any little tiny simple thing that was just like an and or a word that I totally understood, I highlighted, and I was like, I can understand this, and look at how this is going to change my life. And so I would like tell my mom, like, Mom, look at this amazing sentence. She's like, yeah, what's amazing about it? And I just could understand it. And I think that's like, but even like that's something that Heavenly Father does to us. Like, He's not going to give us the entire picture because we won't be able to understand it. So He gives us these small and simple truths that we're able to take in right now and be able to understand, and it brings us joy and happiness.
Excellent. Any other comments? Yes, I liked that idea too. Okay. So that's one of the reasons why I fed you some very difficult works. It's not, the whole point's not to understand everything that he said, but to struggle, to grapple with something so that it means more to you, and so that you can see that there's a lot to learn. And you're going to learn it if you put forth the effort, if you become the person who makes it simpler for you, not reading a textbook that makes it simpler, but you work hard. And the whole point was not to get all the way into it and understand everything, which is a nice expectation, or lack of expectation, right? The expectation was to do what this student went through. All right. Going to share my screen again. We're going to talk a little bit about Shakespeare, sonnets. And what we're going to talk about now with Shakespeare sonnets is going to be helpful in reading some of the soliloquies in his works that we're going to read, the 3 works we're going to be reading. All of his sonnets are 14 lines, okay? And they're all in iambic pentameter, which really means that every line has 10 syllables, consisting of 5 iambs. So there's pent is 5, and iambic means there's 5 of those iambs, which really means they're pairs of stressed and unstressed syllables. Ta-ta, 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 ta-ta. Do you see the stressed is at the end and the unstressed is right before? So those are iambs. And I think that's a Greek word, but I'm not quite sure. And so Shakespeare did something different in poetry than that had not been done before. He used this idea of rhyming with A, B, A, B, and then the next 4 lines, C, D, C, D, and the next 4 lines, E, F, E, F, meaning the A's would rhyme and the B's would rhyme and the C's would rhyme and the D's would rhyme. And then he goes on with E, F, E, F, and then he ends with 2 last lines that rhyme, that are GG. He basically plays a game with words. You notice that there was a lot of contradiction in some of his poetry. He kind of shows how things change and are fickle, and how fast things can move about, for instance, people die, but poetry lives on. And yet poetry may die before the beauty of the real person lives on. Do you see how this is going? He just kind of plays with these games. And we have to ask the question, does poetry have limits? Because here he's saying that poetry lives on. But then he says that the beauty of people live on longer than the writing. I've got a lot of people chatting, and I'm just going to open up my chat so I can see if you're chatting for me. Yeah, kind of like music. Jace, sonnets are fun to write. Yeah, good. That's wonderful. So you have started to read those sonnets today, and I kind of wanted to go in and have you share. I hope somebody has read some of them. Maybe I can find, well, I'm not going to find it online right now because I don't want to take the time, but share with me, those of you who have read the 2 sonnets today, what were some of your thoughts? Kendall.
So I haven't read the ones for today yet, but I read them on Friday. Yeah.
It was my fault, by the way, everybody. I had the wrong due date on it. So anyway, go ahead.
Anyway, I kind of noticed that he used, like, I mean, I'm sure this is true for most poets, but lots of like symbolism. And so I love when poets do that, because then whenever I see that thing that they're like relating it to, I always think of that meaning and that like deep beauty that's in it. And so I just like loved how he does that. And it made me think of just, yeah, exactly, symbolism and metaphors. Just think of like the things that are around me and what they can represent in my own life.
Yeah, good. Eliana, no, who had their hand raised? I guess I thought I saw another hand raised. What are metaphors? What are metaphors? Joseph. Or is that Madeline? It says Joseph has raised his hand, but I only see you.
Sorry, Joseph wanted to say something, and then he said no. But I was raising.
Oh, okay. Jace, what are metaphors?
Metaphors are basically where you poetically state something. It's not meant to be true or to be a lie necessarily. It's meant to be seen clearly, that you're pointing out similarities between things. But instead of like saying this similar to this or has this similarity, simply say that like your angry sister is a bear, even though you're not trying to convince anybody that she actually is a bear.
But you can imagine an angry bear, and it makes you understand your sister a little bit better right then and there, right? Because they're not always a bear. A lot of times they are sweet, right?
An angel.
An angel, yes. Good. So you're trying to see similarities with something, and what poets use are things like leaves. I think that's in one of the sonnets today. Winter. Death is like winter. So death really is not like winter in the sense that it's not winter, but it is like it because everything is dying and closing down and getting cold. Good. All right. What are some other thoughts you had while reading Shakespeare today? Shakespeare's sonnets. They're only 14 lines. They're super easy to understand, right? I've got one person shaking her head. I think only one person read them. Go ahead, Lanny.
Compared to Galileo, I think they're super easy to understand.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, Kendall.
I totally agree with Lanny, Mrs. Whitney. So when I kind of read it, I was like, oh, this is like paradise, or like vacation from Galileo. But anyway, they're not, for me, they are not easy to understand because there's so many metaphors, and I'm more of the kind of person that's just kind of like get to the point, don't like go off in some place, and so it's been hard, but being able to see those things, like I was saying before, I will be able to like relate those things to my own life, and those lessons will go deeper inside of me. So.
Yeah, good. Most of the sonnets deal with love or death or some of the most important things in this life, death, beauty. We don't know if Shakespeare is writing these personally to people. We don't really know that, but we can use them, we can liken them to something that we're going through. For instance, I have an uncle who has a tumor in his head, and it was removed a couple weeks ago, and he has been given a little time to live. That was in my mind as I was reading one of the sonnets about death, and it brought up a lot of thoughts for me, and a lot of ideas to serve on how to serve him in this time of death. So the sonnets we don't have to figure out if it was Shakespeare writing and who he was writing to. We don't have to know those things. What we need to do is take them and apply them to our life and see how they're going to change us. Lucy says, I think part of why they're easier is because it's more open to how you interpret it, where Galileo is more mathematical and mathematics are exact. Either right or wrong. Shakespeare allows us to see it our way and interpret it as we want. Yeah, just as Eliana was saying earlier and what I was just saying. So can we read one together? Let's read one together. Remind me, has somebody looked on Canvas today to see exactly what number it was? Shakespeare. Was it like 73 and 103 is what I read, right?
I see number 3 and 73.
Oh, that's what it is. 3 and 73. I knew it had 3s in it. Huh, my internet is not going very fast. Let's go to 3. I think if I remember right, that one was the one about death. I'm sorry, my Google is not finding it. Maybe if somebody else can find it on their Google. Let me put in copy.
I can share my screen if you want. It's just on the Canvas.
Yeah, let's just do that because I'm having a hard time with my Google right now.
Okay. So here's Sonnet 3.
Okay, perfect. All right, let's read it. First of all, let's look at the AB, CD, EF, GG. Does everybody see that? Viewest and renewest, another and mother. Now look at the next 4 lines. Do you see the... Okay, Jace, what did you say? Just get on because I don't want to open up my chat box.
Oh, sorry. I was just like I was saying, it's kind of interesting how we see things differently. Like some of the people in the class struggled more with Galileo, and Shakespeare is easier for them now. But like Shakespeare is harder for me, and I guess it's because of that subjectivity. And I normally struggle with that. Like if something doesn't have an exact meaning, I keep interpreting in all these different ways, and I get very confused, and I don't get what they were trying to say.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Yes. But one thing that you can get, Jace, pretty easily is you can see this A B A B C D C D E F E F G G, right? It's interesting. Okay. Well, no, this one was not about the death. It was the second one that was about the death. Let's go to the one about the death. Eliana, will you read it? Because you're in control of the screen.
Okay. That time of year thou mayest in me behold, when yellow leaves, or none, or few, do hang upon those boughs which shake against the cold, bare ruined choirs where late the sweet birds sang. In me thou seest the twilight of such day, as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away, death's second self that seals up all in rest. In me thou seest the glowing of such fire, that on the ashes of his youth doth lay, as the deathbed whereon it must expire, consumed with that which it was nourished by. This thou perceivest, which makes thy love more strong, to love that well which thou must leave ere long.
Okay, what's the mood of this? Lucy, you love poetry. What's the mood of this?
I don't know, it kind of reminds me of some of Poe's works. It's just kind of like dark and like, I don't know.
Good observation. Yeah. Is there any hope in that? Is there any hope in it? I don't know. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but maybe anybody can answer that. Carter, do you have your hand raised, or you were just raising?
I can answer.
Okay.
I can answer. No, because like what I picked out in the first few lines is kind of like fall or winter,
Mm-hmm.
when little yellow leaves or none or few do hang, and so it's just kind of like dreary and just. I mean, winter is dark, and you can kind of draw a connection there because death is also dark.
Yeah.
So it's not very hopeful.
It's not very hopeful, but when we see a sunset fading in the west, do we lose all hope that we're never going to see the sun again?
No, because we know it's going to rise again in like 12 hours.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So it's interesting how he's got that in there as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away.
Can I say something?
Yes, please. I'm trying to think of words and they're not coming. Oh,
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that to me, this poem, like, it's tragic, but it doesn't seem like dark to me. Like, it doesn't seem grim. It seems more like melancholy or like lonely, kind of more like a almost romantic tragedy in a way. You know how sometimes people in like poetry or like in plays will like to like romanticize the tragedy maybe, and this is what it kind of seems like to me, because he has a lot of imagery with like nature and like with the sunset too, and like the little birds singing. Like, even though he's saying that's ending, he has pretty words and pretty images that come to your head for at least a second, and so in a way it kind of is like fleeting beauty in a way, and it's kind of like just an experience, I guess. I don't know if that really makes sense.
I think it does. And I think Lucy has her hand up and she wrote about this in Canvas already, or something like this, I think. Will you share with us? Well, you can share with us what you were wanting to share, but then, because you had your hand raised, but then kind of go into what you wrote about in Canvas.
So what I was going to share when you were talking about at the beginning is there any hope or anything that's kind of happy about it? Just in the last two lines, I think it shows, like, just how it talks about that because you know you're leaving, it makes the good things in life, like the summer, it makes it so much more meaningful than if you weren't leaving. So like the sadness allows you to appreciate all the joy a lot more.
Yeah, interesting. Good. And you tell us a little bit about this sadness that you wrote about in Canvas. Would you mind sharing some of the thoughts that you had about?
I'm trying to remember what I said.
Oh, it's okay. I don't want to put you on the spot, but you were talking about how you love books that end in sadness in a way, and that you cry and you process it and you feel cleansed. Do you remember when you wrote that, or was that somebody else?
Yeah, it's just like it. It's kind of hard to explain because it's kind of contradictory. The sadness could make you happy, but like it's so like it takes all of your soul and like you just feel it all. And then after that, like I don't know, after that the sadness is gone. You're like, wow, life is so amazing. Like
Well, kind of what I'm getting from you, I love what you're sharing, because kind of what I'm getting from you is that a lot of times to understand our happiness, we have to see sadness. Sometimes we have to see what's going on and have those deaths, like Sonnet 73 here. We have to kind of experience deaths in something to really understand life. Maybe that's what I'm getting from you, and there may be many more avenues we can go with this, but I agree with what I think you're saying, is that I think it's really good that there are deaths that we experience, that we do understand that there are sad times so that we can understand happiness. What are some of your thoughts? Any other thoughts toward that? Anybody?
I liked what Lucy said. I can kind of understand that. I think that like sometimes like tragedies or like sad stories or like sad songs, like sometimes like they just make you feel kind of like alive. Like it's almost like a recognition that like you're alive and that this life is like kind of fleeting, but that it's like something that you can enjoy right now. And I don't know, it sounds like really weird and like it's totally like romanticized, but like I don't know, it's just interesting how it makes you look at things differently and think about things differently. And like some of my favorite books, they're like children's books, but they're by Kate DeCalamo, and I love her as a writer, and like her books are very poetic and they always end in like people get their desires, but it's in a totally different way than you thought it would be. And it just is like it's kind of sad, but it's also kind of happy. And like, I just like that better than like they lived happily ever after every single time. Cause like sometimes that's fun, but like other times it's like, you kind of want it to have a little bit more depth, a little bit more meaning, and like maybe, I don't know, just seem a little bit more real. And I think that like when a story ends and like it's sad, but like you can still see like meaning in it, or you can still see some sort of happiness in it. If there's something hard in your life, or like if you're sad about something, then like it kind of gives you perspective to realize like even though this is hard or even though this is sad, like there's still good things.
Good. I just had a little thought, a little question as you were talking. I said, so the ideal society needs a little struggle? It's interesting how we've gone from wanting this ideal society to now thinking, what one of the components of an ideal society is to have to maybe experience sadness and joy and death and life. Interesting. Yeah, there has to be opposites in everything, Jocelyn, or else they can't exist. Even if you never experience solely the opposite, you must experience at least a mix of the opposites to appreciate things. I love that. Jace, those are cute. No problem. Yes. Okay. Enjoy Shakespeare. It's not going to take a lot of time to read these. Our little Peter Lightheart says that we need to read them 5 times. Did you hear how he said that you understand it if you read it 100 times? I'm not, and he's giving us a break. I don't know if you've seen, did he talk about that yesterday? I've kind of watched all the videos, so maybe I'm mixing some of them. Did he say that in the video yesterday?
My mom was talking about that earlier, so she must have heard it from somewhere before we even watched the video.
Okay. So possibly, I think he said it yesterday that we need to read them several times, and he's asked us if we'll read them 5 times each. Kendall, I keep forgetting. You've got your hand raised.
Oh, no, that's okay. I was just going to bring up, like, with that, I don't necessarily think that sonnet, like, is a dark, but I do think that it makes it sound kind of lonely, and it doesn't seem like there's very much hope, like, in it. And so it kind of makes me, like, so happy that I am LDS. Because when I go to a non-LDS funeral, it just is so not hopeful, and it's just so dark and kind of, but when I go to an LDS funeral, I just feel like, oh, like, we're sad right now, but we will get to see this person again, and we'll be able to be with them forever. And so I think that brings us so much joy, and that's why I'm so happy I have the gospel in my life.
Yes. And that's another reason why I loved this metaphor that he used about the sun going down, the sunset, because I know it's going to come back. And he didn't know this. Shakespeare didn't know this. He was a couple of 100 years before the restoration of the gospel, but it's almost like it's built into that metaphor that, hey, we know that the sun's going to come back again. And so I can see hope in it in that sense, just because of my understanding. And just like what you're saying. Okay. Oh, Eliana, let's close with your comment.
I was just going to say, I loved how Kendall used the word lonely, because I think lonely and melancholy are really, really good words to describe this poem, because, like, to me, it's different than, like, grim or, like, dark, because when something's, like, really grim or really dark, it feels like there's no hope, whereas with, like, lonely or melancholy, it feels like a desire, like something's missing, and, like, there's kind of more like an awareness that something's missing, whereas with like darkness or like grimness, it feels like people have like already ruled out the option that things could change or that like things could get better, whereas with like loneliness, it sounds like people are just kind of like waiting.
Lovely. I love that. Okay, on Wednesday, we will have read all the sonnets, and we will have started to read King Lear. Make sure that you have King Lear. But our discussion next week is not going to be just about King Lear. I want to take maybe the first half hour, and I want each of you to be prepared to lead us in a little discussion on one of the sonnets. Just kind of like what we did today. We spent 25 minutes on one sonnet. I want everyone to be prepared to be the moderator. And we're going to divide up for a half an hour into, I think, 3 groups is what we'll do. And by then, Kendall, I need you to update your, it was you, to update your Zoom so that you can be able to move into the rooms. I talked with Zoom, and if you don't update, then you're not able to be moved into another room. So we'll move into another room for about a half an hour in groups. Be prepared to moderate one of the sonnets and discuss it. And then we'll come back, we'll talk a little bit about, we'll debrief about what you learned and what were some of the high points of your discussions. And then we'll go right into discussing some King Lear. And those of you who, I think I'm burning something. Edie, could you add some water to the potpourri thing really quickly? Those of you who studied the Dark Ages with me, now I'm saying the Dark Ages, the medieval time period, we read the actual original work. Is it burning? Oh my gosh. It just burned. I have some potpourri on the oven, on the stove, cooking, and it was just burning. What was it? We read Monmouth. Gregory of Monmouth, is that what it is? Yeah. So he wrote the actual story of King Lear that Shakespeare got this from a few hundred years before Shakespeare. So we kind of know the story. It's going to be kind of fun to go into the play that Shakespeare takes us to. So we'll discuss him for the remainder of the time next week. Madeline, do you have a question, or Joseph? Madeline?
It was me. I was just going to say, really quick follow-up. Did any of you guys get my email about maybe having study group? I'm just wondering if anyone is even interested in something like that, and what days would be good for people. I'm thinking just half an hour.
I highly encourage it. Highly encourage it. So
I know Lucy talked to me and she said, I forget, she said one day was better than the other. Wait, did you? I don't know. Lucy,
So,
back to me.
Eliana and Kendall and I have been doing one. And we're fine if people join. Actually, that would be good. And we're doing it Thursdays in the afternoon. So.
Is it around 11 or 12 for our time?
Well, you've got your writing thing, so.
We said, I think it was 12:45 to 1:15 Mountain Time. Nope, actually.
No, you have blinked at one. It was 11:45.
Yeah, it's hard for me because I'm not in Mountain Time, so I always convert things to Mountain Time. And
yeah. Okay, so it's 11:45 to 12:15, I think.
In this classroom. So that would be tomorrow. You could come for about 30 minutes and discuss. Okay?
Yeah, we usually do it for about an hour, which is why we had that long of a time span.
But you can stay as long as you want.
Yeah, you can stay as long as you can.
The thing we want to make it a more casual feel, like not a class.
Like
so
no
if you're wanting to come, we want you to come with like ideas that you could and just input, because we don't want people to come, listen, and then leave, because I think that's not the purpose of a study group. So
yeah, and whenever we've done it, like we've just been so open that like we pretty much have not clicked mute like for an entire hour.
No.
And we just are conversing, but it's only been the three of us, so like I'm not saying everybody should like leave their mute off, don't do that, but like just be prepared to like discuss.
That sounds good.
Okay.
So if anyone can come, we'd be super excited to have you.
And those who can't meet on Thursday, form another group that you can. And Madeline, if you can't meet that time period, form another group, because I highly recommend we do those. All right, let's end. And those who want to stay on and talk about study groups are welcome to do that. Thank you for a wonderful class today. Bye.